What's up, everybody? It's AT, and truly do appreciate you jumping in on this Aaron Torres Pod YouTube bonus clip in just one moment. We are about to give you a very interesting update on Dylan Raiola, the #1 quarterback in America. He is on campus at Nebraska right now, and I think we got a new sign that he is about to flip from Georgia and become a Nebraska Cornhusker. Before we get started, though, need you to do me a quick favor. You see that little subscribe button at the bottom of the screen? Go ahead, hit the subscribe button. Closing in on 31,000 subscribers. I think we can get to 35K before the new year. Can't do it without your support, though, so make sure to subscribe. Also, put on notifications so you know when new videos are popping. Speaking of popping, a lot of news coming out of the high school football recruiting world. National Signing Day is on Wednesday, and you know the biggest story in college football, high school football recruiting is what is going on with the #1 quarterback in America, Dylan Raiola, of all over, but of most recently of Buford, Georgia. So we've talked about this story for about a week now. I think everybody knows the story, but #1 quarterback in America, committed to Georgia in May, but there's always been ties to the University of Nebraska because his father is a legend there and because his uncle is an offensive line coach at the school with the Cornhuskers. And so I bring it up because last Monday, Steve Wiltfong, the most reputable, plugged-in recruiting guy in America, flipped his prediction to Nebraska from Georgia. This kid's been committed to Georgia forever. And when we last left you, it was late last week. And really, I think the most interesting piece of news at that point was we knew there were crystal balls coming in for Dylan Raiola to flip to Nebraska. And more importantly, we knew he was visiting Nebraska this weekend. Also, we discussed the fact that Kyle McCord basically said, "I'm out on my recruitment with Nebraska." That seemed to indicate that Matt Rule had let him know, hey, listen, we want you, but we're going to have a young guy that we got to get some reps to at some point. And so a lot of people criticize Kyle McCord for that. Listen, he's got 1 year of eligibility left. I don't blame him. He ended up committing to Nebraska on Sunday morning. But let's dive into the Dylan Raiola perspective of it, because I think there were 2 or 3 new pieces of news since we last recorded that are absolutely worth discussing today here on a Sunday afternoon as we are, I don't wear a watch. I'm not Shedeur Sanders, but it does feel like we're pseudo on commitment watch here on Sunday. First of all, a couple things. One, and I do think this is important, Dylan Raiola made it to campus this weekend, okay? So for people who weren't on social media over the course of Saturday into Saturday evening, Dylan Raiola is very much in Lincoln. There was video of him at the Nebraska wrestling meet. And listen, I'm not a body language expert. I'm not claiming to be a psychologist, an armchair psychologist. Didn't look like he's having a good time. Now, I'll be honest, it's not often you see a video of a kid on an official visit where he doesn't look like he's having a good time. I will leave it to Nebraska fans to determine his body language and what it means and all that. But the fact that he's on campus, the fact that he is potentially ingratiating himself with his new teammates, to me, I just think it's a big deal because he actually made it. Because how often this late in recruiting, now maybe not a player of this caliber, but how often do you hear about a kid, oh, he's going to make a last-minute visit, or oh, he's going to do this, and then it doesn't end up happening? He never goes. He gets a change of heart. He thought he had cold feet signing with the school that he was signing with, and then he actually gets cold feet when it's time to go visit somewhere else. So to me, just getting him on campus is a big deal, and I do think it goes back a little bit to what we talked about last week, is this is a kid that grew up around that program, grew up on that campus. His father played there for many years. They've gone back quite a bit during his younger days. His uncle is an assistant coach there. And so again, he didn't have to go even if he wanted to decommit from Georgia and flip to Nebraska. The bottom line remains he knows everything there is to know. He's seen everything there is to see. So the fact that he decided to go anyway, that doesn't feel like a last minute, I don't know, I'm sort of thinking about blah, 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 this and that. No, it feels like a guy that knows that he's going, and he's like, you know what? Let me take this trip. Let me get to see everybody, and let's put pen to paper on Wednesday. Again, if he was having second thoughts, I don't know that you need to take the trip. So that's something that stands out to me. The fact that he actually made it to campus. How often do we hear at this time, right before signing day, the number of people who are, oh, we're going to, and then they end up not visiting, not flipping, not decommitting. The fact that he's on campus to me feels very important. I also think it's very important to follow the recruitment of the other guys at the position. We just talked about Kyle McCord. Listen, Kyle McCord was set. I don't know if he was set to commit to Nebraska, but listen, he's a third-year junior. I know he's taking a bunch of heat from Ohio State fans, but I don't think he is visiting Nebraska himself or planning to visit Nebraska himself if he isn't seriously considering going to that school. So the fact that he all of a sudden says, I'm not going, I'm not interested, and the reports have been that Matt Rule was very blunt with him. And by the way, one thing about Matt Rule, I love Matt Rule. I'm all about Matt Rule. I actually spent a good bit of time on a few days ago listening to his interview with Pat McAfee. Listen, I've been critical of Pat McAfee on game day. McAfee is an excellent radio host. I thought he did an awesome interview with Matt Rule about 4 or 5 days ago. And one thing that stood out to me, Matt Rule said, in this era, 2023, as you're trying to develop a program, you have to be honest. You can't say kids are too smart, parents are too smart, the internet tells all. And the bottom line remains is if you're going to tell a kid, you're the only guy for us, well, the internet will tell you if that's not true. The internet will tell you if you're recruiting a linebacker and like in the old days, could recruit a linebacker say, oh yeah, you have a pathway to a starting spot. And then that kid shows up and there's 5 other players in his class at his position. And what Matt Rule said was in 2024, 23 into 24, you can't do that. And so listening to Matt Rule talk about McAfee at the same time that Kyle McCord is saying, I'm not coming, that's interesting to me because it basically confirms what Matt Rule said to McAfee, is that in this era, we're not going to lie to kids. We're going to be transparent. We're going to be honest. And the transparency that Matt Rule had with Kyle McCord, was, hey, listen, we love you. We'd love to have you. We want you to be our starter, but we also have to get a young guy reps. Also think it's worth noting, and I had a few Nebraska fans reach out to me over the course of the weekend to discuss this element of it, is that Daniel Kaelin is the name of another quarterback who was in this recruiting class who certainly had an interesting couple days in his own recruitment as far as what his future is. So this is a kid that's been committed to Nebraska since the springtime. Ironically, maybe not, he committed to Nebraska shortly after Dylan Raiola committed to Georgia in the spring. And so I bring it up very simply to say that over the last about week or so, Daniel Kaelin basically came out, and he hasn't publicly said it, but he is very much now looking at his options. He was supposed to take a visit to Michigan State, and then he canceled the visit when Michigan State took its own portal commitment at quarterback, Aiden Childs. But I just bring it up because, again, this confirms the Matt Rule stuff that I just talked about a minute ago. It is clear that probably at some point in the last week, he was told, look, we'd love to have you, but we will be taking another guy at your position in your class. And so it wouldn't shock me if that tough conversation was had. By the way, I think Pete Thamel actually reported as such. I don't want to discredit the guy who's reporting it, but I believe Pete Thamel had something to the effect of, Nebraska said, we still want you. We're still going to honor your scholarship. We're still going to honor the NIL agreement that we made. But basically, we plan on taking somebody else at your position. So again, another piece of news that, in my opinion, feels kind of relevant. Finally, and this to me, maybe I'm the only one, feels kind of important though. Did you see our boy Matt Rule? Talked a lot about him over the last couple of minutes. Getting some itchy Twitter fingers on Saturday night. Okay, so it was about Saturday night at midnight. Had a bunch of Nebraska fans send this to me. By the way, if anybody knows Matt Rule, tell him we need him on the Aaron Torres pod, the Aaron Torres pod YouTube channel. Let's get him on once we get through signing day. This guy is a rock star. I really believe in him and what he's doing at Nebraska. But here is what he tweeted at about midnight Central on Saturday night. He said, can't wait until people hear what I've heard, see what I've seen, and know what I know. Hashtag GBR go big red. No edges, LOL. To which I would say, maybe it means nothing. Maybe Matt Rule was just in his feelings. Maybe he saw a beautiful sunset in Nebraska, and he said, I love this place, whatever. But you know what that tweet at that time to me says? says, oh, he's got some very interesting news that he's got to go ahead and update us on. Can't share it, can't talk about recruits publicly until they sign that piece of paper, until National Signing Day. But it feels like he was feeling himself at about midnight Central the same weekend that the #1 recruit in America decided to visit. Maybe it means nothing. Maybe he just really enjoyed that wrestling meet. Maybe he was feeling his feelings after Nebraska did whatever they did on that wrestling mat. But to me, it sure feels like he knows there is a good news coming. Good news coming. I don't know why I say a good news. Good news coming. By the way, I like the LOL at the end of that as well. Let me say this one more thing about Matt Rhule. I would also say maybe it means nothing, but it probably doesn't. I think Matt Rhule is too smart to tweet something like that. Like if there's no news, like I think Matt Rhule understands the new era of college football, the value of social media, the value of sharing a message. And so I just bring it up because like, I think he knows what's at stake in this recruitment. You know, a lot of eggs in the Dylan Raiola basket. Again, they might have lost a transfer portal QB. They might have lost a really good quarterback in the class of 2024. And so I just bring it up because of the fact that, like, I don't think he tweets this out at midnight Central, knowing, again, to use his own words, knowing what he knows about Nebraska, its fan base, and the interest in this recruitment, if he doesn't know. And so I could go on, but I think this is officially the last update on Dylan Raiola until we get something concrete. But I am here to tell you, if this happens, it is so big for college football, so good for college football, right? We've talked about how the portal and NIL has kind of flattened the playing field in college football, how it's allowed Steve Sarkisian to completely rebuild Texas in 3 years, excuse me. Kalen DeBoer has Washington in the playoff in year 2. Dan Lanning had Oregon on the cusp of the playoff in year 2. Brent Venables clearly improved Oklahoma from year 1 to year 2. And I don't think Nebraska's far behind. I'm not saying they're going to be Texas and they're going to be a top 4 team by year 3 under Matt Rhule, but it is clear this whole thing is trending in the right direction. And I can't wait to see if and when we get something official on Dylan Raiola. When we do, by the way, you know, the page is going to be hopping. So make sure that you're subscribed to the YouTube channel because we have so much more content coming in the lead up to National Signing Day. And oh, by the way, in the lead up to the portal, to the New Year's games. I will be at the Rose Bowl, so fired up for that. Might not even get a gray wall behind me for the post game. Maybe actually get Torres on the Rose Bowl field. We'll see all that. Appreciate your support. Subscribe. We'll keep you updated. Turn on those notifications. Appreciate everybody's support.